back to our Forum at 8 discussion, joined by the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, as well as Professor Roxana Osman of the Wits School of Education at Wits University. She's the head of that. Good morning to you both once again, and thank you very much for joining us. Perhaps to kick off, Minister, it's fair to say that I thought you were fairly excited about the matric results, an improvement of 3.7%.
No, I am quite happy and very encouraged that we are indeed making progress.
Mm-hmm. And what do you attribute that progress to?
It's hard work in provinces by all MECs, but also our district directors, because we have a forum with district directors where we meet almost every quarter to track our progress, to get district directors to support each other. But mainly there are schools that it's quite clear that our schools now are focusing on that which we want them to do, to focus also on academic outcomes.
Mm-hmm. And just comparing the national results, was there a distinction between the performance of rural and urban schools?
There is. I mean, if you look at the number of passes, our bachelors, the majority, the bulk of them will be coming from your quintile 5s. But what we are happy, which we also reported yesterday, that we are beginning to see the reduction of the gap between your poor schools and your affluent schools, which is very also.
So resources still having an impact on the overall performance of schools. Is that why? It's been something that's been highlighted for years. The difference between the IEB results and that of the NSC.
It's family resources more than state resources. In terms of state resources, unfortunately, the bulk of the resources go to poor schools. Your affluent schools carry, especially the parents, carry the burden of educating their kids. The bulk of government resources go to poor schools. IEB and state, IEB kids are South African kids. We celebrate their success. But to really go and compare 9,000 kids to 520,000 kids, really comparing a sector, 1.8%, IEB makes 1.8% of our system. So we are a big system. So we have big problems.
And the challenges are much bigger. And any aspects that you feel you could have improved on? I mean, if we look at the matric exemption pass rate at a little over 20%.
Come again?
The matric exemption pass rate in terms of overall, we have a much higher pass rate in terms of the number of learners who have passed matrics, but those who have achieved an exemption, matric exemption, that figure has improved, but some would say it's not satisfactory.
No, we can still do more, but it's at 26%. 26% for the size of our sector, it means more than 136,000 kids got matric exemption. So it's big in terms of numbers. And as a country, as a developing country, we need to have more of our young people going to do other careers except for academic careers. So we have another 139,000 kids who qualified for a diploma pass. They can do all other very important careers also with it. So more than 300,000 kids qualified to go to tertiary for different kinds of courses. So I think it is encouraging. It's not what we still are fully satisfied with. And that's why we're committing ourselves to working even much more harder, because we are aware that more still needs to be done.
I'm going to read some of the SMSs to you. This one says, there's much boasting about the increase in the pass rate, but only a week or so I heard an official in the news saying that marks are adjusted to give some learners higher marks. What does the matric pass really mean? That's Dale. I suppose it's a standardization by Umalusi. Perhaps if you could just take us through that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate but I think it's also part of the South African psyche that you always have find the mistakes. Only 5 subjects were upped, 12 were lowered in terms of standardization. Actually, if we didn't have any standardization, with all the marks that we had, we will be at above 75%. So.
But what does standardization really mean, so that people can understand and we don't have to cover this ground again? Because I'm pretty sure that we are going to, because the concern has been that, we have a much higher pass rate, but the quality of the pass itself, the quality of the matriculants seem to be lower.
No, that's unrelated. standardization is an international practice whereby you have an independent body. It looks at your exams. It looks at everything else, irregularities that might have happened, to be able to really clarify whether the exams were fair, were credible, and they were run with integrity. So they look at all the reports, not only in terms of only the scripts. Then they look at trends, because what they normally, which is also normal practice, you also don't allow too much of an increase, because the quality of this year's pass should be comparable to last year's pass, so that if you say a kid has passed with A, that A should be as good as the A 5 years back. So the standardization looks at whether the question papers, the answers that were given, the trends in the subject are in line with, an acceptable either growth or decline. And that's what they do in terms of standardization. They don't interfere with marks necessarily to either influence a pass or a decline. They really look at standards to make sure that the validity, the credibility, and the integrity of the passes remains the same.
Speaking of trends, of the matriculants who passed this year, how many of those started school and eventually uninterrupted got to grade 12 and passed?
I know we're getting to. You're getting to the fact that we're losing more than 25% of the kids. And what we ignore is that before even Democrats, only a third of African kids reached matric. Under Democrats, more than 2/3 of our kids reach matric. So, which is something I think we have to celebrate. We are the ones who came forward to say there is an area of concern in our system, that by the time our kids are between 16 and 18, they drop out of school for different reasons. It could be academic, it could be economic, it could be just delinquency.
Social.
So social problems. And that's what we're attending to. And that's why we revealed the figures out to say provinces have to make sure that they understand why our kids between 16 and 18 drop out of school, or when they're in the senior phase, and deal with it. And our provinces are dealing with it. Western Cape, for instance, which is one of the provinces which had higher dropout rates, consciously the Premier and the MEC went out of their way into communities to deal with the issue of dropout rates. So it's not anything that we are not aware of, and that's why we took it out in the public. I mean, we are the ones who took it out to say there is a problem.
But some say because of that, it effectively reduces the real matric pass rate. So when we look at this pass rate of this year, or should I say the 2012 matric pass rate, effectively what we're looking for is a reduced pass rate, because of those who went through school for 12 years, it is not that high. It's somewhere in the region of 37%. How do you respond to that?
Now, we shouldn't use that to subtract from the success that we're making in matric results, because those are unrelated. The dropout rate has nothing to do with matric results. Okay. The dropout rate is a concern that as a country we do have a third of our kids falling off the system, but it's unrelated to your matric results, because it's not done to manipulate matric results. We are not concerned about it because it affects matric results. We're concerned about it because it affects our learners, that we have more kids not completing their schooling. So it's a schooling issue, it's not a matric issue. Okay. So what we're focusing on is the 520 that got into matric, and 73.9% of them passed. So the dropout rates and other things are just part of the problems that we have in the system and which we're dealing with.
Professor Roxana Osman, is this your assessment, understanding of things?
Well, I mean, I think the minister is absolutely right, is to look at the big picture and then to focus particularly on the matric percentage pass rate. She's absolutely right that since democracy, certainly access to schooling for all children, and particularly children from poor households, has been exceptional. However, the question of educational success is always a question we have to engage with, and that is that while we're dealing with access, we've done really well with access. Success is a question that must be explored and needs to be explored and probed at all times, because it's only when all our children succeed with an excellent schooling, that we can say that we're moving forward in the way that we are.
As I asked the minister now, just looking at the various reactions from various quarters within society about these matric results, what seems to be coming up often is, as I mentioned to her, the quality of the matric pass rate. Your opinion on that?
Well, I think the issue around disaggregating the data and breaking down the data is absolutely essential. What we're seeing is the percentage, the national percentage pass rate, disaggregated data in terms of in which subjects are students doing well, where is their decline, particularly in which schools, in which provinces, and in which districts. And I think the idea of setting up a task team that's looking into the quality of the pass rate is a very good move. It's a move in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. What you say, though, is that it is very encouraging to see that the number of matrics who are remaining who are remaining in the system is quite encouraging, and that's what we see in the 2012 results.
Yeah, I suppose what you see in the 2012 result is the number of students who've stayed in the system and then the number of students who've succeeded. Questions still remain about what's the quality of that performance, and again, the quality of the performance of the number of students who
Why do you say the question remains that what is the quality? Based on what? What raises that concern for you?
Well, the concern, what I would like to see, and I think that would be available in the technical report and in the report that the task team will produce, I would like to, for example, look at in mathematics, what's the in the overall percentage that we see, what was the threshold of achievement in different provinces, in different schools, particularly, different districts and different schools. So we may be seeing that globally there's an improvement in let's take the gateway subjects as an example. We see an improvement in the maths and science pass rate. But what's the nature of that improvement? So exactly what percentage, what number of students obtain 30%, what number of students obtain 40%, and so on and so on. And the Minister has alluded to that briefly in her introduction.
Minister, Professor Osman, just in some of the readings or the writings that she's proffered, is that what is concerned is that almost half of the learners taking maths and matric score less than 30%, meaning the kind of questions that they need to answer correctly to score 30% really require basic ability or to already fairly routine procedures. Your response to that?
Sorry, your question.
I was asking, I'm looking at some of the readings that you have proffered, and I'm asking the Minister on your concern that the matric learners who score less than 30%, that it's not really a good indication of their capabilities, because the maths requires the ability to perform only fairly routine procedures. So I'm asking the Minister to respond to that.
No, those are not the issues that as a sector we run away from. That's why if you look at this technical report that we have before you, we do exactly this analysis. The mere fact that we come out bravely as a sector and say and assess our grade 9s and go out public and say our grade 9s only performed at 13%, it means we are quite honest about where the problems are. So it's not anything, it's what we always do. We appreciate, we read all the documents that are produced for us to help us identify, because what we never shied off from is this government, that in 2009, when we re-established administration, we separated basic from higher education. And the motivation was that the educational outcomes are not what we expect them to be. And that's why our focus is on quality. So to say... I think to create an impression that we're running away from the fact that quality is a challenge is not true, because that's exactly.
Okay, so Minister, what is the answer to the question that provincially, what are the figures of the improvement?
Especially the technical. You want me to take you through the technical report?
Yes, please, Minister.
It's huge.
But on this particular issue?
We're making progress. We have more learners this year who passed at more than 40%. We monitor that because it's one of our areas of concern. So we have more learners passing at more than 40%. Because it is an area that we're focusing on, it's an area of our concern, it's an area where we're giving lots of attention to.
Professor Osman?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, Minister, I'd like to put you at ease to suggest that no one is suggesting that the government or the ministry runs away from hard questions. Your department has shown very clearly that you are willing and able to tackle the hard questions. But the issue is that the quality of matric exams remains one of the hardest questions that we have to engage with. And it's good to see that there's evidence from your department that you're engaging with those hard questions at all times. So my issue really is that while we're looking particularly at the national percentage, and that is very important to give us a national picture, lots of work remains to be done at the level of districts and schools, where that information has to be disaggregated and filtered down to what the achievement and performance levels are at particular schools. And then I do think that there's a serious responsibility for districts and particularly teachers at the level of schools and principals to make sure and understand the performance that their students have achieved and what that means for children who are proceeding to grade 10, 11, and 12 in the next 2 to 3 years. So what I am suggesting is that the national percentage that we see publicly is very important, very good, but at the level of districts and schools, there's lots of work to be done, and particularly in relation to how performance is interpreted at that level.
Okay, I want us to talk about that in just a moment. I'll give the Minister an opportunity to respond. 0891 104 208. Should you like to call us, this is the hotline number you can use, 0891 104 208. Your SMSs, send them to 34701. It's at R2 per SMS, 34701. And if you're a matric learner who's just passed and done well, or even if you haven't got your results as yet, you don't know, but you would like to talk to us about some of your challenges or perhaps what helped you through the experience, please do call us 0891 104 208. We can even call you back. We'd be happy to do that. Minister, your response to monitoring the interpretation of performance at district level?
That's what we do. I'm surprised that you assume that we will not do that. That's part of our work. You see, what we do when we get results, the first thing is to look at the overall pass, then go into the passes themselves to understand what they mean, what the trends are, what the percentages are, even go into scripts to understand where our children have ongoing challenges. We study the Umalusi report. We go district by district, school by schools, because the school improvement plans are supposed to speak to your results. Because as I said yesterday, assessments also help us with planning, understanding where the problems are and what is it that we need to do in terms of supporting our teachers, resourcing the center. So
at district level, what did you find to be some of the challenges?
In terms of subject by subject or districts themselves?
In terms of performance, overall performance of the learners.
No. You see, for instance, you can't, and I think that's what Sarah is saying, you can't analyze your matric results only per district. It's per subject. So even if you go to a district which has 80% pass, you still have to understand what happened to the 20%, what were the subject by subject, item by item, and then say it's clear that our teachers, but sometimes you find that there are questions, a whole question that all learners have not responded to, even if they got 80%. So it tells you that it means your teachers don't understand or don't teach that section. So you go subject by subject, item by item at district level.